By tea time, you will be a Quaker.
Tea time, you'll be a Quaker.
Welcome back.
This is really a sort of a slow but steady journey through the smorgasbord line, right? So we're sampling things along the way, like you do if you're sensible. You got smorgasbord here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, what a great thing. If you load up on the first thing you see, you're in trouble. So you sample along the way, and you know for the next course what you need to go back to, what you want to go back to. So I hope today will be spacious enough to allow us to taste, to move in and taste things. Eckhart loved that sense that we taste God. We taste God. There's a taste of God. He's the only theologian I know of. Maybe there are others. Correct me, but extend my ignorance if you know of others. But he had a marvelous sermon on the taste of God. Because, of course, there is sweetness. Remember the quote from the very beginning of the video. The first thing the soul desires is the sweetness, the knowledge that it's sweet. But that's not God.
It is, because it's taste and see, because the Lord is good.
There we go.
That's all.
It's taste and see. And beyond that tasting, beyond that seeing, beyond that loving. So the inner spark. We're moving now, Gelassenheit, we can't leave that behind. Abgeschiedenheit or Gelassenheit. This relinquishing, separating, creating an emptiness within us so that there's room. We spent the evening, part of the evening last night, with the poems of Rainer Maria Rilke. I spent a good part of my life with Rilke and another part with Eckhart. And increasingly I realize that these are very different thinkers, clearly, but there are certain distinct convergences. And one of them is Rilke's use of the word Raum, room. It's an essential word in his lexicon. Because we have to create a Raum in us, a room in us, an empty place in us, so that we're capable of receiving. Because if you arrive at the smorgasbord full, nothing will please you. Nothing will interest you. Everything will annoy you. Empty yourself. And God cannot resist that emptiness. That's Eckhart. The inner flame. What is the inner spark? The inner flame. Funklein, you called it. This light that's always, always, always burning in every creature. Human creature, and every creature, Eckhart would have said, because every creature is on that journey from God into God again. Every creature. Not just the reasoning creatures, not simply the rational creatures. Every created being will be drawn eventually into the oneness of God. And so one of you asked totally appropriate question, being a bit disturbed, I think, and puzzled appropriately by my comment about being able to change the past. What about the traumas of the past? What about the difficulties of the past? And if we had a long enough view, even these things will find healing. Eckhart would have said, it is the Christ in whom all things hold together. Colossians, first chapter. The one God in whom everything broken and wounded will be made whole again. This inner spark. First we begin then with a quote from one of the sermons, sermon number 7 in David's collection. Therefore I say that when we turn away from ourselves and from all created things, to that extent we are united and sanctified in the soul's spark. which is untouched by space or time. This spark desires nothing but God, naked, as God is in God's self. Indeed, I will say something that sounds even more astonishing. I declare by the good and eternal truth that this light is not satisfied with a simple, still, and divine being, which neither gives nor takes, but rather it desires to know from where this being comes. It wants to penetrate to the simple ground, to the still desert, into which distinction never peaks. Never glance, please. This is Eckhart. That something about our lives that needs to know this, because our anxieties come, and they're very real for me and for you. Our worries, our anxieties, our fears are very real. And they create enormous disturbances in our life and in our life. Right? You know that. And there is something beyond those things. Eckhart often described it as a desert. The still desert. The still desert, or the abyss. The simple ground. Grund. The medieval German word Grund, which means, as in the English, we've taken that word over, it's the double entendre. Ground is the ground, and to ground something is to be on the ground, and grounds for something are the reasons, right? It has this kind of fullness of meaning. The ground, the simple ground, that's God. The simple ground, the still desert, into which distinction, multiplicity, particularity never peaks. Now, this doesn't mean that distinction doesn't exist. It does. Look at all the faces around. Look, just take a look at the varieties of faces. Look around. Not at me. Look around. At these marvelous faces. Now, no one face is exactly like the other. In fact, most of you are staggeringly different. Look at us. Look at us. It's remarkable. You think about it. There's a wonderful, often quoted lines in the journal of Thomas Merton, where Merton is walking through the city of Louisville one day at the corner of, what's the name of the street? I don't remember. 4th and Walnut. 4th and Walnut. And suddenly he sees in this massive, diverse humanity oneness. He sees the oneness. He glimpses it for a moment. And no one can read that very simple journal entry without being profoundly moved, because it's profoundly true. That in the midst of our diversity, in the midst of what distinguishes us from each other, something in us participates in this oneness. And it has nothing to do with our politics or our religion, our opinions. It has nothing to do with the ephemeral things that shape our life, which football club we root for, which political party we're angry about, that might bind us together in moments of common misery or joy. And common misery binds. I mean, it was really funny. I'm walking down the street, St. Giles, and there's an army recruiting shop, or whatever you call it, and it has a picture of soldiers in a tropical place with helmets and so on. And the caption is, you want to belong? This is what belonging is about. And there's something about that. I mean, sharing, risking your life. I don't want to get into the morality of war and armies and all of that, which I'm actually not for. But when we find ourselves risking with others, facing adversity with others, facing danger with others, it binds us together, powerfully. And Eckhart would say, well, that's a dim sense of what I'm talking about. And our joys bind us together. Our delights bind us together. It's not the same when you hear a recording on the radio of the prom, you call them proms, as when you're sitting in the hall with thousands of people experiencing the music in the moment of its aliveness. That's the present, not the radio. Although the sound may be the same. Because it's not immediate. So Eckhart is saying, beyond the radio experience, beyond the filtered experience of our lives, there is something immediate. And he describes it using the most extreme language he can as a desert, a still desert, a silent desert, or as an abyss, or as a simple ground. And for Meister Eckhart, glimpsing this, getting a peep of it, glimpsing that, moves us beyond everything that disturbs. And we will only get glimpses of this, really. This breakthrough, I love that word, Durchbruch, the German, his German, this breaking through, can't happen all the time. But when it does happen, it shifts something fundamental in us. It opens something. It peels things away that we thought we were attached to. And I was so moved, as I'm sure you were, by the response of the President of France when Notre Dame burned. We will rebuild her, our lady. We will build her again. And it will be more beautiful. I believe that. That in a way, if we think that the tragic moments in our lives are the ending points, and we're in sore need of education, of reminders that falling apart is the moment where we discover what's truly essential in our lives. Whether it's a diagnosis that we've received or a friend, whether it's a tragedy that happens to someone we know or to ourselves, we have the moment of seeing what's essential. Eckhart described that in terms of this very simple metaphor of the Funkeln, the little spark within us. This spark desires nothing but God, naked, as God is and God so. One of the breaks, several of us we were talking about, what about church, what about prayers, what about liturgy, what about Eucharist? Let me be very clear about this. Eckhart was not against any of those things. He was a priest. He was not simply a Dominican teacher. He was a priest who celebrated the sacraments of the church, who preached indefatigably, who was a wordsmith, but knew that God was on the other side of all of that, on the other side of liturgy, on the other side of Eucharist, on the other side of theology. That God was not in those things, held captive in them. Maybe they release that glimpse of God beyond, what he called the God beyond God. And that's essential. And you could almost take that same phrase to say we have a glimpse of love beyond love, a love beyond what we think we need and desire of love, a peace beyond peace, a truth beyond truth, a joy beyond joy. Yes, this is our God. Your only delight. There is in me a radiance that never ceases. That's a fairly outrageous claim. At least if you're like me, if you ask my spouse or my children, they would say, Dad, come on. Mark, get serious. A radiance that never ceases? Sometimes you're gloomy, moody, cantankerous, yes. Selfish? Are you sometimes selfish? Yes. Bewildered? Yes. Angry? Mm-hmm. Is there a radiance that is ever shining in your life? Yes. And often you know nothing about it. because you are focusing on the things you think you need, or the things you desire, and can't imagine living without. That's just fundamental. There is in you an undying spark, Eckhart reminds us, that never stops shining. And your work and mine is to find that spark in your life, and then to imagine that it's here in your life too. And in your life, Steve. And in your life, John. And Georgia, in your life. And in the lives of people you don't like. And even, and this is the hardest one, in the lives of people you hate and you fear, which is the source of all unhappiness in societies. If we had the power, and it is a power for Eckhart, of knowing, of breaking through those barriers of fear and of anxiety and of worry. They're very real for us. Eckhart never would have diminished them. But he would always say, there's more there. You're only getting started. Look deeper into the heart where that spark is always burning in your life and in the lives of others. There is in me, in you, a radiance that never ceases. And if I had eyes to see into the darkest depths of my heart, I would know that this inner spark is all you ever see. Let's try this again. There is in me a radiance that never ceases. Just say that quietly to yourself. There is in me a radiance that never ceases. Just say it quietly to yourself. It's always there. It's always there. Now remember, a very tense moment in my adolescence. I say this now with great affection for my father, who was slipping into deeper and deeper dementia. And he's almost gone. But when I tell you this story, it was present to me now as it was then. I was 13 or 14, and I did something really, really stupid. I was the only 13-year-old that did something really stupid. You didn't do something. I did something really vulgar. It didn't hurt anybody. It was just stupid, and it was nasty. And I had written something. I'd drawn something. And somehow I was stupid enough to leave it out. And my father found it. I didn't know how. And I came down to breakfast the next morning, and it was sitting there on my plate. And I thought, oh, shit. Excuse my French. I know that's not a word that exists in Oxford. Oh, shit. And my father came down, and he said, that's not who you are. That's that right. It's an incredible moment. I've never forgotten. It was a redemption for me. And it was so profound because it was, and when I became a father, then you have the chance to practice that with your children, to be more generous than you think that you can be, but as generous as you know that they need you to be, which is a profound experience. There's something of this in Eckhart, looking at you and saying, despite what you've done, despite what's happening in you or to you, there is an essential flame, which is all God sees. That was my father's gift at 14, when I needed to hear it. That's not who you are. That's all he said. Let's have breakfast. And if I had eyes to see into the darkest depths of my heart, If you had eyes strong enough, courageous enough to look into the darkest place of your life, most of us fear that, and we look away. We thwart our gaze because we're afraid to look there. We're afraid that we'll be obliterated. In psychological terms, we will be annihilated. We're afraid we'll lose everything. If we dare to look there, they'll know that we're a fake. They will know that we're a fake. Eckhart would say, go there. Because only when you go to that darkest place will you discover the truth that there is a flame there that never ceases. And that's all God sees. That's all God sees. That's all God sees. That's the only thing. God doesn't see the catastrophes we've caused, the hurt we've inflicted and received. God sees that spark burning and says, that is who you are. I would know that this inner spark is all you ever see of me, whether by day or by night. And this alone is my one and your only delight. Not bad as a poem, but it's certainly Eckhart's genius that wins the day. My one and your only delight is to see the inner spark. What is this inner spark? What is the inner, the Funktime? What is this inner spark? It's distinct for each of us. My inner spark is not your inner spark. Your inner spark is an essential gift of you, the you-ness of you, if I could use a neologism. It's the you-ness of you is that inner spark. It's the essential, what Thomas Merton often referred to in his writings as the true self, beyond the false self. And we occupy most of our lives, much of our lives, with the false self, the projected self, the professional self, the social self, the family self, the faithful self, the helpful self. All good things, but not essential to who you are. There are things about you, but they're not the you-ness of you. The you-ness of you is this spark. And Eckhart would say that's all God sees. And it's not just true for you. It's true for the most difficult person you know or could imagine. There was a story told of the distinguished theological professor, Swiss Professor Karl Barth. After the end of the 1940s, he was addressing, he was invited to a community to give a sermon and a talk. And in the discussion that followed his talk, a woman needled him and said, if I understand what you're saying about grace, you seem to think that Adolf Hitler could be saved. And Barth, without pausing, said, of course, I believe that profoundly. If God is God, God is able to save and wills to save everyone, even Adolf Hitler. That'd be special, he thought. This is essential to Eckhart. And it's one of those grounding insights, this inner spark. Let's see where it takes us in another. This is again from the Counsels of Discernment. The person who has God essentially present to herself grasps God in a divine manner, and to that person God shines forth in all things. We heard this earlier, right? for everything tastes to her of God. And God forms himself for us out of all things. Powerful thought. That God forms God's self for us out of everything. That if we would know God, then in some ways he says you have to do away with all the creatures in you, the attachments, to discover that God is in everything and in everyone. That God is waiting to be known, to be seen, and to be loved in everyone. And how do you do that with difficult people? The same way God does it with you. Right? By seeing in your life, in the midst of your unfaithfulness, confusion, anxiety, fear, whatever it might be, this spark, this fruit vine, this inner spark that never stops burning. Never. God always shines out in such a person. There's a stunning turn of the sermon, of the thought. It's like a person consumed with a real and burning thirst, who may well not drink and may turn her mind to other things. But whatever she may do, in whatever company she may be, whatever she may be intending or thinking of or working at, still the idea of drinking does not leave her so long as she is thirsty. He's not talking about an alcoholic here. He's talking about somebody who is so parched to drink water that they're continually aware of that yearning, that longing, that need, essential need. Eckhart would say the breakthrough is essential. And it must happen again and again and again. Because it's not, how to say, it's not persistent. It's not an accomplishment that we can do once and then hold on to forever. Because we're constantly lost in a world of particularity, in our responsibilities, in the burdens that are placed upon us, in our worries, in our anxieties. All a part of who we are, but not the essential part of who you are and who I am. Eckhart would say the breakthrough is needed in every moment. And when that begins to happen, it doesn't matter where you are or with whom you are. What you see is what God sees. This shining in your life and in every life. That's there under all of the detritus, under all of the layers of crud and confusion, is this spark burning. And for that person, God shines forth in all things. So Eckhart would say, as he does in some of the sermons, so you don't find God in everything? That's not about God. That's about you. If you practice meditation, and some of you do, I'm sure, of some form or another, what you discover with the persistence of a practice of contemplative practice, whatever it is that the breakthroughs happen only through the pain and the boredom of sitting and waiting. The emptiness has its place, but it's not necessarily easy. It's not complicated, but it's demanding. For everything, for such a person, tastes of God. And God forms God's self for us out of all things. Out of all things. Love shines. Even as my thoughts about you fade. Love shines even as my thoughts about you fade. For you are always present to me beyond what I think or feel or do, and when I turn to you and accept you in this simple way, I have you in every way and in all things. And you shine out in me as the love that cannot cease. One seeing, one knowing, the sense that for Eckhart, my eyes and God's eyes are not two things. They're one thing. But I need to discover that persistently in my life. And when will I discover it? Probably when it's most difficult. Otherwise, I have no need to do it. I'm complacent in my self-satisfaction. But when my life begins to fall apart, or life around me begins to fall apart, I have the chance to truly break through. Beyond my projections, and beyond my anxiety and my needs. Love shines in my life, in your life, all of the time. Do you see it? Can you find your way to that place? That's Eckhart's task. And he is tireless in seeking images, metaphors, to help us find our way back to the front line, the little radiant spark that never stops burning, shining. One more. You know what this text is from. Paul rose from the ground, and with eyes open he saw nothing. What's the, from the book of Acts? What's the story? Sorry? Yeah, the road to Damascus. He has this experience, an overwhelming experience. You know, it's funny, Paul never wrote about that. You'd think if it was that important, he might have mentioned it along the way. Think of the images Paul uses to describe his own life dying with Christ, being crucified with Christ, so that he might be raised up with Christ, so that he might be resurrected with Christ. It's not far from the way Eckhart imagines, although normally Eckhart uses the language of, I haven't used it. Normally Eckhart uses the language of being born, because he is sure that somehow in each one of us, Christ is being born now. That you, he says, are the only begotten son or daughter of God. You. And that if Christ was only born in Bethlehem of Judea 2,000 years ago for us, 1,300 years ago for Eckhart, it had no point. Unless Christ is being born in you as the only begotten daughter of God. This, by the way, was one of the things that some of Eckhart's colleagues found unbearable. How can you say that? You must privilege Christ. He said, I am privileging Christ. There is no way to privilege Christ higher than this, than to say that Christ, God desires for us what God gave us in Christ. That's Eckhart. God desires for you what God gave us in Jesus of Nazareth, a true human and the very true presence of God. And Eckhart would say, and God desires in your life today that you know that you are the only begotten daughter of God. That you are the only begotten son of God. Because that fruit line is in your life, waiting. Paul rose from the ground, and with eyes open, he saw nothing. He was blinded. Why? Because there was too much light. This is where Aquinas begins his view of knowing. He uses an image that he had stolen from Aristotle. And Aristotle surely stole it from someone else. Talking about what happens to the bat when the bat comes into the daylight, can't see anything. The bat flies at night because the bat doesn't need light. But if a bat comes out in the day, they're very confused. You don't see bats flying generally in the daytime, unless they've been roused from their habitat. Paul rose from the ground, and with eyes open he saw nothing. I cannot see what is one. Eckhart always uses a single sentence for his sermons. Always. This one sentence. It's not a bad reminder. I'm often so exhausted by the time I've gotten through 3 or 4 long biblical readings, and I'm trained in this. I'm trained in Scripture. I'm trained in theology. I spent my life studying these things. But I think we have a text from the book of Deuteronomy, and we have a psalm, and we have a reading from Hebrews, and then we have a gospel reading, and people are utterly exhausted. All of us. You were just utterly exhausted. There's so much there. Eckhart would say, well, less is more. Take a single line, a single image. Let that be enough. Because from that single point, everything is there. This is his confidence. If we believe this, but we wouldn't always choose the happy texts. He doesn't. What would you do with this text? Paul rose from the ground, and with eyes open, he saw nothing. Well, it's the beginning of a remarkable sermon, 71. I cannot see what is one. He saw the nothing which was God. God is nothing, and he is something. Whatever is something is also nothing. And here people must have been thinking, he's lost it. He's actually lost it. Wouldn't you? If you heard this as a sermon, you'd say, oh, the rector needs a vacation. The priest is in trouble. We need to have a support group. We need to talk to the bishop. We must talk to the bishop. The bishop needs to know. It's a crisis. God is nothing and God is something. Whatever is something is also nothing. Whatever God is completely. And a little later, a master says, one of the teachers, one of the theologians, a master says, whoever speaks of God through a simile speaks of God in an impure fashion. But whoever speaks of God as nothing speaks of God properly. I don't recommend that you try this with your neighbor. Let me tell you, God is nothing. They might agree, but they would miss the point if you're following Eckhart. God is no thing. And God is something. Indeed, for Eckhart, God is everything and no thing. God is in all that is, and all that is in God. Now, why all of this background noise that comes out of a simple text of Paul being blinded by the risen Christ and rising from the ground with eyes open, seeing nothing? I cannot see what is one. I need new eyes. I need to see differently, to learn to look differently, so that I can see differently. I need to learn to gaze and not simply glimpse. I took a group of students with me in a class on Rainer Maria Rilke and Augustine, as you say here, Augustine. We were reading the Confessions and we were reading the Elegies together. It was a remarkable experience. And there was an exhibit on at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston of modernist art, of the art contemporary to Rilke. So we went to the museum for an evening, 20 students, and we did something staggeringly subversive. I told them to go through the exhibit. There were about 60 paintings and pieces of sculpture. Just walk through it at a normal pace. What's the normal pace in an art museum? How long does a person normally stand in front of a painting? Guess.
2 seconds.
3? Too long. Yeah, it's usually a little less than 2 seconds. Think about it. Yeah, it's around 2 seconds. Is the average, if you just did a study of people, some people obviously stay at one for a long time and then walk quickly. Anyway, I had them walk through, choose one piece and go back and stand in front of the piece for an hour. It was really interesting. They did. Then we gathered and each one of us described what it was we had seen. And I've never heard such descriptions of art before, including scholarly studies, which are looking for something different. This was truly seeding to the point of entering the work. And then we went back to see it at peace with the student. It was a wonderful experience. Try it sometime. Take a group of people with you to Yashmoldia and just practice the patience of gazing until it's difficult, and then just stay with it. Eckhart would say this is the heart of the spiritual journey. This patient practice of the gaze, not the glimpse, the gaze. And over time, you will begin to see differently. Over time. Flame my life. Of the desert fathers. It may have been Macarius. I don't remember. I took a spellbinding seminar with a man who came to the United States from All Souls, Peter Brown. Forever changed my life. Any of you know Peter Brown, historian of late antiquity? One of the most remarkable scholars I've ever been around. He had a terrible past, a terrible stutter, which was a bit off-putting because he realized that his mind is going so fast. The stutter, as he said once to a group of us, was just give him a little chance for his mouth to catch up with his mind. Macarius once wrote that this simple line, if you will, you can become fire. If you will, you can become fire. Flame my life. Take a moment and turn to someone next to you and muse about what this possibly could mean. If you will, you can become fire. And this prayer, flame my life. Take a moment. Talk to someone here for a moment. What could it possibly mean to become fire? What would it mean for you to become fire? did you say? What did you tell your neighbor? What did you hear them say? What did they say to you about becoming fire, about flame? What did you hear? Take a moment. What did you hear?
It could be dangerous.
Could be dangerous. Yes. Fires are easy to start and very difficult to control. Yes. A lifetime burning in every moment is a little bit much to imagine. It could be dangerous. It could burn things down. Yeah. What did you hear?
Just a little burning can take you further.
A little burning can take you further. A little burning can take you further. Funny, I teach a course with our students when they're preparing to write their thesis, their bachelor's thesis. And the very first session, I just ask them, what do you burn for? Not what are you interested in. Because if you come up with a theme you're interested in, you will write a mediocre thesis. But tell me what you burn for, and we'll find a way of creating a theme for a project. It's fabulous. I mean, really, if you're looking to help people with writing skills, what do you burn for? It doesn't have to be the only thing, but what are you burning for? It could be a little burn. It could be a little burn. Right. What else? What did you hear?
It has to be passionate. But
Yes.
it can have good and bad sides.
It can have good and bad
You could be
sides.
an ISIS borrower and be very passionate. And
Yes.
burn for your beliefs.
Yes.
So
I walked by, there was a truck right out in front. It was called ISIS Transport. Have you seen, is that a company? I think you have to change the name of the company. You can't have ISIS Transport sitting in front of the Ashmolean. Sorry?
It's a river.
Oh, the ISIS River. Okay, ISIS. Great. But somehow I moved quickly by it. By the Ashmolean, the ISIS Transport is not a good connection. What's in this truck? I don't want to find it. Okay. It can be dangerous. Yes, it can be dangerous.
Are we open to the spirit of Pentecost?
Are we open to Pentecost? Are we open to the flames? One of the most profound images we have of people beginning to burn with their vision of oneness, which is what it is. Pentecost is a vision of unity, of oneness.
That's when Surrey said that that's the passion
Yes,
and the fire, almost the feeling of coming out from church or wherever,
yes,
and feeling, I think the people see them on fire.
yes, yes. Hopefully it happens. Not all the time, it can't, but sometimes it happens. And when that happens, you know you're alive. You know you're alive in God, or God is alive in you. You know it. You don't just think about it. And for Eckhart, breaking through was not just getting a new thought. It's finding a framing of life that shifts something essential in your experience of yourself and of others, the world. Yeah. The flames of Pentecost. Others.
It depends in a way what the fire is against.
Yes.
I'm thinking both, sort of if the fire is against one's iciness or inhibitions or, and actually
Yes.
can go there, then fantastic. I'm thinking about the sort of fieriness and the self-belief that's allowed with Brexit, for example.
Oh, we got all the way through the day.
Which
Yeah.
becomes the right one and the
Right.
wrong one.
Yeah, which can be devastating
Yeah.
if we don't get that clear. Yeah, burning isn't a virtue by itself. Burning for the right things is a virtue. Learning where the flames bring life and join us together, and not simply tearing us apart. Yes. Others. Yes.
it could be the opposite, like purgatorial fire burning down
Sure.
into the lake.
Yes.
It talks about
Absolutely.
Refinement's fire.
Yeah, the refinement's fire.
It might just mean lit up.
It might be lit
Or
up.
being lit up. And we
Yes.
always enjoy being lit up.
Yes.
And because it's so constant,
Yes.
it comes with a light immediately.
You see it in the face most of all, right? When
Yes.
somebody is truly happy, their face is glowing.
Yes.
Their face is, yeah.
Well,
the road to Emmaus, the two disciples, didn't our hearts burn within us?
Yes. Later they say this.
Yes, later.
Later. They couldn't conceptually understand. I mean, it's a great scene, isn't it? It's a cinematic scene. Are you the only one who hasn't heard the news? Oh, what a great line. Are you the only one? We all knew this. Jesus says no. Later. When does it happen? At the breaking of the bread. Our hearts burned within us. What a marvelous image. But they didn't know it at the time. They couldn't claim it. They were so distraught, confused, afraid, that they couldn't see what was in their midst. What a parable of the spiritual journey. And true for all of us some of the time. That we're so full of our own anxiety or fear, or desire or need, that we can't see the flame in front of us. Or we can't admit what we're feeling. And I've loved my years in Germany, which are coming to an end. Every good thing eventually comes to an end. And one thing I've learned over the years, and I say this with great respect and affection, is that it's very difficult for Germans to do something that's perhaps too instinctive for Americans. We praise recklessly as Americans. Germans never praise people. It's a very rare thing. And when it happens, it's a big moment. And it's not a criticism, it's a cultural difference. But it took me a long time to realize that people behave differently in a culture that is a profoundly intellectually alive culture. But the vigor of discussion would never mean that you would praise somebody in the midst of it. And praise, I think, is essential to our human life. Praise and flaming somehow belong together. I'm not quite sure how. But the flames that burn open us to a kind of exuberance that's in us all the time, pushed down by cultural restraints in different ways. You have your ways, we have ours. We've just elected a moron who cannot see beyond hyperbole and superlative, who cannot imagine anything else, doing reckless deeds with the world we live in. We'll survive him. You'll survive Brexit, or whatever happens. But praise and flaming belong somehow together. And if we could find the instinct to praise, I think much of our cultural confusions would at least find a way of summing out differently. One last reflection. What did you hear your neighbor say?
Okay, that spark within us, if the flames come from that spark, then it can only be God created and
Great.
all one with God.
That's great. If the flames come from that spark,
That spark of God within us.
that's a wonderful way of putting it, that it can only be good.
Could you repeat that, please?
If the flames in our life come from the spark that is within us, this inner spark, this Funklein, then it can only be good. But of course, flames can come from things that simply destroy, and are not good. So yeah, there needs to be a discernment.
Destroy the ego, the things that
Yeah.
stops from being
Exactly.
one with God.
Good, good, wonderful, wonderful.
But I'm only talking about good because God is nothing else.
God is nothing else. Eckhart would say God is nothing but good and God is not good. God is beyond good.
So all is okay, whichever.
That's well said. All is okay, whichever. Yeah. I have a friend who's going through a really difficult time, and I was with him on Thursday for his birthday, and I brought a clock back that I found in Camden. I wish you had one. I wish I would have brought one for each of you. It's just a clock, and the numbers are all jarbled. They're just all in one pile at the bottom, 6, 8, 9, 7, 4, 2. And then at the top it says, whatever. Isn't it great? art, you know, produce it. Every one of you would buy it if I had it for sale here. Whatever. It's wonderful. And he immediately just lit up when I brought this out and put it on the wall. Whatever. What's time? If we really burn from that front line, from that little spark in us, the things that we worry about wouldn't matter as much. We learn to relinquish, to let go. This is where Eckhart is showing us how do we find Gelassenheit, not by exercising, not by working at it, but by relinquishing, by letting go of what we think we need. A wonderful little book I read when I was in graduate school, one of the books I could never forget, by a wonderful Dutch-American theologian named Henry Nouwen. Many people know him. He wrote a little book called With Open Hands. You remember that book? And it begins with this, he was working in a psychiatric hospital at the time in New Haven as a priest, visiting psychiatric patients, troubled people. And there was one woman, I think it's at the very beginning of the book, whose hands were clenched when they brought her in. And they couldn't get her hands open. She was just holding on, and finally, after a long period of time, they were able to coax her to open one of the hands, and she had in her a little coin. It's nothing, penny, whatever. Well, it wasn't positive. She was holding on to this for her life, as if she couldn't let go of it. The widow's mite. She gives what little she had. She wouldn't let go. And now he uses this to say this is what so much of what our lives look like, too much for the time. We cling to what we think we have to have, which may have no value, but which we're afraid to relinquish because we fear we'll lose ourselves. That could be for you a job, or a marriage, or a relationship, or a place you live, or persons who are important to you, or a context you cherish, whatever it might be. And there's nothing wrong with any of these things, but if we think our eternal life depends upon those, we're in for a lot of unhappiness. Because it can't, and it won't. The front line, the little spark, is all that matters. Flame my life. Teach me the humility of knowing that nothing I can do can grasp the love that is your one and ever hidden work. Teach me the humility of knowing that nothing I can do can grasp the love that is your one and ever hidden work. Not there. Love is always, always burning in us. But it's most often hidden. We don't know how to see it. We're looking in all the wrong places, or we're looking with the wrong eyes. If we knew how to look, we would see this flame. And let me, in my darkness, come to see this nothing as a radiance that burns until it finally blinds me. And so flame my life with the radiance of love until I finally see. Teach me the humility. Could one of you read this for me, for us? Strong voice.
Teach me the humility of knowing that nothing I can do can grasp the love that is your one and ever hidden work. And let me in my darkness come to see this nothing as the radiance that burns until it finally blinds me. And so flame my life with the radiance of love until I finally see.
Thank you. Let's hear it one more time. With a male voice this time. Somebody? Yeah?
Teach me the humility of knowing that nothing I can do can grasp the love that is your one and ever hidden work. And let me, in my darkness, come to see this nothing as the radiance that burns until it finally blinds me, and so flame my life with the radiance of love until I finally see.
The radiance of love. If this could be the prayer you speak each morning, it might help shift something in the way you enter the day. It might give you the courage, encourage you to dare to believe that your life is hid with God in Christ. St. Paul. Let's end with just a moment of silence and just set aside your book or your notebook or pen. And for a moment, read through this poem until you come to a phrase that is enough for your grounding phrase. Just read through it slowly. So some one word, one image, one thought catches you. And stay with that for a moment. Let that burn in that empty place, which is the cradle of God. It's a wonderful morning. It's more this afternoon. It's time for lunch. So we have 45 minutes. We'll come back at 1:45, and I'll be